In this video we want to talk about the Stinger, respectively Igla missiles in Battlefield 4. In contrast to Battlefield 3, where the Stinger and Igla were simply optical equivalents but were only usable for one of the fractions, there are some actual differences now in Battlefield 4 where the two missiles actually work differently. One thing that both Stinger and Igla have in common is that they deal 45 damage to air vehicles and of course cause a so-called mobility hit. The main difference between Stinger and Igla is the range of the weapon systems. The range of the Stinger is 350 meters, and on top of that it is a so-called fire and forget weapon where you don't have to maintain your lock on the target, but the missile will track and hit its target even beyond 350 meters. In contrast to that, the Igla has a range of 450 meters, but you have to maintain your lock on the target all the time, otherwise the missile wouldn't hit. This of course sounds like a huge disadvantage when you hear it for the first time, so if the target manages to fly out of your 450 meter range it wouldn't hit anymore, but there are other points that actually make the Igla a valid weapon. Well, so how do you defend yourself against weapons like that? It's pretty straightforward with the Stinger. As soon as you drop your flares, the missile will be distracted and will not hit you. It's different with the Igla though. As soon as the flares have burned down, the Igla can reacquire its lock and hit the same target. This means that an Igla cannot effectively be countered with flares as long as the heli stays in range or does not fly behind a natural obstacle like a skyscraper or so. Of course, in a situation like that you might also just fire a second Igla, which is not very effective looking at the ammunition that you have at hand. By the way, both Igla and Stinger have 5 missiles at the ready by default. To defend yourself against Igla missiles, we recommend that you use ECM. ECM stays active for a longer time, doesn't burn down as quickly as flares do when they are being deployed, so that the reacquiring of the lock will usually not happen when using ECM. Against Stinger missiles, ECM is not so good. While Stingers can be countered with flares with a high 90%-ish probability, 60 or 70% of the Stingers will simply bypass ECM. But then again, ECM originally was not intended to be used as a countermeasure but to break lock-ons. This of course leads to some problems since the hit detection in Battlefield 4, as you all know, is client-sided. So as soon as I start locking on a target with a Stinger or Igla, the server will be notified of that a tiny bit later according to my ping to the server. Also, the driver of the vehicle that is being locked on by me will be notified a tiny bit later, of course according to his ping to the server. Since the driver of the vehicle has to use his ECM before the lock-on is actually completed though, because of this client-side hit detection, in the majority of the cases you will still be able to get your Igla or Stinger shot off. This is why it's so hard to use ECM in the proper way and interrupt lock-ons with it in the first place. So if you're a nasty person and you want to take advantage of that, you might enter a server where you have a high ping, and if you see the enemy air vehicle using ECM, you will always be able to get your Stinger shot off and the enemy vehicle driver will not be able to suppress the lock-on with his ECM. This is extremely difficult and dangerous for jet pilots simply because 90 to 95% of all the Stingers will still hit a jet through active ECM. So let's sum this up at this point. The Stinger missile can be countered with flares but not really with ECM, whereas Iglas cannot be really countered with flares, but ECM proves to be very effective at suppressing Igla lock-ons. Alright, so how do you make the best out of all of this? We are going to present different tactics for the usage of Stinger and Igla, and we are going to present the Igla first. If the enemy pilot drops flares relatively early or has flared already, you can put 2 Iglas on him with the same lock-on. This small trick usually doesn't work if he drops flares late, because then only one of the Iglas will hit him. Using the Stinger, we would advise you to apply different tactics. If you see the enemy focusing on ground targets mostly, we would not advise you to use the Igla. This is simply because you're forced to present yourself out in the open when you're firing and have to hold the lock with the Igla, so he might still kill you. In this case, you're better off using a Stinger. Simply fire one shot and then hide for the entire duration of your reload so that the enemy doesn't get the chance to kill you. Looking at those tactics, it appears that the Igla is especially effective against helicopters, That is simply because you can deal 90 damage to them within one lock. And on the other hand, they are usually not fast enough to get out of your maximum lock-on range of 450 meters. The Stinger, on the other hand, seems to be a good idea against fast-moving targets, like jets of course, simply because the Stinger does not stop to track and eventually hit its target even beyond its lock-on range of 350 meters. On top of that, as you all know, jet pilots usually fly with ECM so that they can disappear off of the air radar when needed, which does not help them to counter Stinger missiles, while a jet can simply counter an Igla by flying out of its range. Thanks for tuning in. If you liked it, then we're linking you to our latest quick tip compilation and moreover to a video that comments on the Battlefield 4 netcode.